In a new age world filled with delusions and wish fulfillment by morons in need of attention, renowned experiencers of high strangeness and podcasters Jeffrey Ritzman and Jeremy Vaeni received invitations to a tropical paradise getaway called Paratopia. Little did they know, it was the same type of new age spiritual retreat they've been avoiding all their lives.
Don't be shy.
Communion isn't just about priests hitting on boys. It's about aliens raping men.
Come on, you can shake it.
Yeah.
Don't read, don't think. Just take a drink.
Anything goes at Paratopia. And welcome.
Jeff, I'm just not feeling doing a podcast today. I'll tell you that much.
I'm not either. It's a beautiful day. What's the point in being cooped up in that goddamn little tiny room?
Well, that's the thing. They're all beautiful days, and we keep missing.
Yeah. Ooh, look at that.
Yeah. Are you looking at thongs again, Jeff?
Yeah, there's a lot of girls on the beach today.
You do have a wife, you know, even though we're on vacation. Just thought I'd remind you.
Shh.
Never mind me.
Hi, how you doing? Shh. Be very quiet. I'm not gonna hurt you. Me, a big American man.
Loser.
Oh, see, that didn't work.
Gentlemen, great to see you.
No, dude, we're not doing a podcast today. Absolutely
A
not.
podcast? Nobody wants you to do a podcast, of course not. It's been a while, Jeffrey Ritzman and Jeremy Vaeni. Won't you please join me for a refreshing Kool-Aid?
As long as I get one of those little umbrella things, I don't care.
Yeah, dude, I'm all in.
Jeff, you gotta...
Easy!
Ugh. Jeff, I almost swallowed a puckered starfish.
Oh.
Don't know what that's slang for, apparently, where you're from. All right.
I said, oh.
Here's that age difference again. Hey, what is that? You hear that sound?
Yeah, you know, I do hear that.
That sounds awful familiar.
I know what that is.
Is that Whitley Strieber?
No.
No, he's not here, right?
No, he left days ago. That's the theme from Communion. That's what that is.
That's Philippe Mora. He actually directed the movie Communion.
Oh yeah.
Jeff, he must be directing Communion, the staged reading that we've been trying to see for like the last 3 months. Because that's Zachariah Sitchin, right? Playing Whitley Strieber, and Angelia Joyner is everybody else? I don't even know who she's playing. I think Andrew the son, right? It's kind of weird casting, but you know, Philippe is kind of an artistic guy, so
yeah,
we should go over there and just see what we can hear, or hear what we can see. You know, however the senses work.
Is that someone there? You know, I see you. I don't think I like this. I'm seeing something. I'm seeing something there. I don't... No! Get out! Get away!
God! That was moderately acceptable, Zachariah. Great work. Hearing aid, Zach. Turn on your hearing aid. I said that was great.
I require the PayPal payment.
What the hell is PayPal? So, well, whatever it is, I noted.
No, give me the monies.
Right.
Jeff, this is awesome. We wished for this.
I guess the secret works even when we don't.
Philippe, hey!
Excuse me. Do I know you?
No, but I know...
Then it's Mr.
Huh?
Wait a minute. Make that Doctor. Wait a minute. Make that Von. I like that. Von Mora.
Dr. Moore, can we get a minute of your time?
It's Von Mora.
Jeff, you just said time, and that's important, so stop arguing and listen. With your mind.
What is time? I mean, we see time linearly, but the peoples of the ancient worlds, well, they saw time cyclically, and my father just knew that when he came home from work, my mom better have dinner on the table, or, well, there were consequences. And I used to hide in the cabinet, underneath the sink, and I'd listen to them argue, and I'd cry, and I'd muffle my ears with my hands, and sweat would drip down from my hair that was way too long for a boy, but, you know, my dad was into the whole hippie thing. My mom thought I looked like a girl. I was conflicted. I took to eating, and, well, what is time?
Wrong, chunk of change. Time is money.
My money.
No, but I want my money.
It might not have been a spider, what I saw.
Angelina, whatever your name is, Joyner. I called cut minutes ago, and you have to understand I am Von Mora, and you will obey my orders.
They're all soft and perfect. They kind of like a poem.
God, bloody hell. Do you know what? Look, fine, let's talk. I need to get away from these sodding fools.
Cool. We got a private podcast cave right around the corner here. Boy, we sure are getting a lot of mileage out of these footstep sound effects, huh?
Where are you going, Whit?
Philippe Mora, you are the director of one of Jeff and my favorite movie, Communion, not just because of the alien theme, but because it is the Christopher Walken performance I've ever seen. And so thank you for getting that out of him.
Well, thank you.
And one thing that I was struck by, Jeff and I listened to the commentary track together a couple of weekends ago, and we were struck by the fact that you throughout stick to the psychological theme of the movie, and in the commentary track you sort of indicate that you aren't certain that it's much more than Whitley Strieber having a serious bout of writer's block. Well, first of all, I mean, is that an accurate description of what you think is going on with Whitley Strieber after all these years?
Well, kind of, but not really. You know, I've known Whitley for a long, long time. I met him in London in 1968, 69 at the London Film School. And the film came about because I lost contact with Whitley for a while. He became quite a famous writer. I'd made some movies, and we reconnected in New York. I think it was 87. And I showed him a film I just made, Death of a Soldier, with James Coburn. And we had lunch. And at the lunch, Whitley said to me, you know, something really strange is happening to me, but you'll laugh at me if I tell you what it is. And I could tell he was totally sincere. I mean, this was like someone who was, you know, genuinely disturbed about something. And then he said, if you promise not to laugh, I will tell you. And I said, okay, I promise not to laugh. And he said, well, I think I've been abducted by little blue aliens. And I said, well, look, you know, I think you should get a psychiatrist and get a publisher. And both of which Whitley did. And so then he wrote the book, and as the book was being written, he was sending me the galleys. If you read the book carefully, the way you describe what I'm saying in the commentary is not that far from what Whitley originally wrote in the book. He didn't know what it was himself, because let's face it, it's such an extraordinary experience. The first thing you are going to ask yourself is, am I going crazy or not? Right. So that was an issue, and then he underwent all those tests, including lie detector tests and other psychological tests and everything. And it turned out that, according to all the tests, he believed that what had occurred to him was a reality. Now, of course, we don't know. I mean, and that's why, you know, I took, let's just say, an agnostic position in the movie, because I thought it was stronger to be an agnostic than to just go straight out they're here, people are being abducted, then it would have been a conventional, well, in parentheses, conventional sci-fi movie. Whereas I was just trying to be logical about this, and so if you take an agnostic position, you leave open the possibility that this actually did happen, which is what I wanted to get across.
Well, yeah, and I actually thought it was a stroke of genius on your part to do that, because it did bring to the fore of the movie the mystery of it, as opposed to answers, which is what Strieber's all about, remain open to the questions, and gave it sort of a mystical quality.
Yeah, look, I think there is as you know, you guys study this, and I studied for a bit. I mean, this is a bottomless well of philosophies and questions and science and art, and it's an incredibly complex and rich subject. I mean, going back into the history of all this stuff, it's just amazing. I'm still not convinced either way. I personally had some experiences. I mean, when we made Communion, I went out to the upstate New York at the cabin where Whitley, prior to shooting the film, I went out to the cabin and Whitley invited me out there. And I don't mind telling you, it was really spooky. And I think Whitley wrote about this in one of his books. But I had a experience, and now you got to bear in mind, here's the agnostic talking, I was preparing to shoot a film on being abducted by aliens. Mm-hmm. So this was all in my head. But I went for a walk with Whitley in the dark woods, and the very clear skies up there, and then way up, we're looking up in the sky, way up in the sky, there's satellites, what looked like you could say were satellites. It was very, very high up, but they're moving at fast right angles. I mean, it was odd. Mm-hmm. And Whitley, creepily said to me, "Oh, look, yeah, this is what happens before they visit. I've seen this before." And I thought, oh, he's just trying to, freak me out. But in any event, it's good material for the film. And that night, I had this very vivid dream. A very vivid dream where I was, the classic bright lights through the window. Then a very, I would describe it as the Communion face, except extremely old. I mean, this was an old face, if you can imagine, 120 years old or something, wrinkly face, smiling at me over the bed. And next thing I remember, I was outside in the living room of the cabin, lights coming in through the windows, bright lights coming in through the windows. And there was a little swimming pool outside, and I could see like a light beam either sucking light out of the pool or putting light into the pool. Anyway, I was walking around, and then Anne, Whitley didn't appear in this at all. Then Anne suddenly appeared, and she was very upset, and she said, "Whatever you do, don't wake Andrew." Andrew was their kid at the time, little kid, and I could see him asleep in his bedroom. Anyway, that was, and then the only other memory of this dream was a strange kind of lab. This turns into a kind of a horror movie, but a strange lab, and there were like artifacts in what looked like glass vials, like skinned rabbits, that sort of thing. Anyway, I woke up the next morning, thought, oh my God, that was a nightmare and a half.
Well, you didn't wake up during the nightmare, did you?
No.
I mean, normally a nightmare wakes you up and you...
I didn't.
Sort of...
No, I just remember those sort of 3-4 basic incidents, and then I woke up in the morning. And then Whitley, me, Anne, and Andrew were having breakfast, and Whitley says, "Well, how was your night?" And I said, "Well, I have to tell you, I had the damnedest nightmare." And I explained what I just explained to you guys, and Whitley said to Anne, "Anne, did you wake up in the night? Did you see Philippe in the night?" And she said, "Well, I'm not sure, but I did get up." So anyway, here you go. So what happened? Was it a dream? What was it? The explanation for the lights coming through the window could have been Whitley had animal photosensor animal light things that would trigger. So, but what it did do, I must say, I did transfer that experience into the movie, because it was absolutely like, you know, these cliche words, I don't know, but unreal, supernatural, awesome, freaky. You know, it was beyond what a normal nightmare was for me. So, but again, I was preparing a film about this exact event, and it's easily my imagination could have triggered this.
Well, is it something that stuck with you through the years in terms of it?
Yeah.
Well, for instance, I have a relative who, you know, had a UFO experience once way back when, and for the next couple of decades cannot stop looking at the sky, trying to, you know, see what she can see. Has it affected you in that way? Are you always looking over your shoulder, or has it affected the way you think about these things over the long term?
No, I'm not looking over my shoulder, but it's certainly still very vivid, as you can tell by the way I described it to you. It's still very vivid in my mind. And I called my wife that morning and told her about the whole thing. But in a more, you know, down-to-earth, no pun intended, more down-to-earth story, was after the film was made, I was in San Antonio discussing a potential film about Majestic with Whitley. He had moved to San Antonio. And the film Communion had just come out. And I was late for the airport in San Antonio. I was running to the airport, and there was a guy running behind me. I checked in. You know, once you check in, certainly in those days, they held the flight for you. So they just said, hurry up, get to the plane, they're holding it. So, and the guy right behind me did the same thing, and we were running down the corridor, got into the plane, and there were 2 seats left. These were pre-booked seats, and coincidentally, or not coincidentally, the 2 seats were right together, and this guy plunked down next to me. We took off, and he said, well, that was close, wasn't it? I said, yes, and I started talking to a very nice guy, like Robert Redford out of Night of the Condor, typecasting, intelligence agent, preppy, Ralph Lauren type, you know. So, and young guy, very pleasant, and he says, oh, what were you doing in San Antonio? And I said, oh, I was just speaking to a friend of mine, Whitley Strieber, about what we just made a film called Communion. And he suddenly goes, oh, Communion, yeah, that's the best film ever made about alien abduction. And I thought, oh, that was a strange thing to say. I said, oh, thanks very much. And he said, do you know Whitley Strieber? And I said, well, yeah, of course I do. I made the film. And he said, oh, do you believe that's all true? And I said, well, I don't know. I wasn't there when it happened to him. I certainly believe he thinks it's true. And then the way he was questioning me, I said, look, if you don't mind me asking, are you a journalist? And he said no, and he opened his jacket, and there was this big badge, National Security Agency, which I even knew at the time. It was way above all the other agencies at the time, and it was a brass gold badge, eagle, and I didn't know what to say, so I just rather lamely said, gee, I didn't know you guys had badges. And he said, oh yeah, we have badges. And then we had a perfectly pleasant talk all the way to LA, and he said he was on his way to San Diego. They'd had computer problems, and that he was shutting down computers in various places across California, or resetting them or something. And he gave me his card, and that was that. And then I was a bit, I was disturbed by this. Obviously, National Security Agency run after you, sit down next to you in the plane. And I spoke to my lawyer. I told him what had happened, and he said he'd had some background. His dad had been in the Air Force, and he knew some. And he said that's a classic way that at that level, those agencies, they do just bump into you and ask you stuff. They don't ring you up and make an appointment on that kind. So he had some word for it. I've forgotten what it is, interface or some technical jargon for it. So that was fascinating. And I know that, Whitley said that he had been, the Air Force had interviewed him when Communion came out. And, we know the history of this. There's been a lot of military interest in UFOs. For a variety of reasons, by the way. As you probably know, there was a whole program to not confirm or deny UFO reports in the 60s, and and early 70s, I think, to camouflage the existence of stealth bombers and other aircraft that we were developing. So people would see these stealth bombers, which, by the way, look like, I don't know if you've ever seen a stealth bomber in real life, but I mean, they look more like Star Wars than Star Wars. I mean, they really are unbelievable. People would see these things, ring up the Air Force, and the Air Force would say no, because it was a secret weapon, and then, of course, that started a whole lot of conspiracy stuff, and you know, people lost trust in government. Some people lost trust in the government over this stuff because they'd actually seen these things and they were being told they didn't exist. Mm-hmm. So, as I say, this whole subject is incredibly rich, as you guys know. That's the end of my little speech for the moment.
Well, that's amazing.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Philippe, when you were making Communion, I think one of the things that Jeremy and I are seeing about people who experience this kind of phenomena is that there are more than enough odd synchronicities that happen. And I guess the NSA story would definitely be one that was connected with the film. But was there anything on set that you can think of that kind of was a weird synchronicity or a weird glitchy thing that would show up here and there and kind of make you look sideways at the whole thing, you know, from a standpoint of what you're making the film about?
Well, that's a good question. There was one guy, and not to make light of this, but there was one guy who, one crew member who was driving home and then found himself in the valley here, 20 miles away. And when I say not make light of it, he may have had an alcoholic blackout or something. We don't know, but he definitely had lost some time there somewhere. The experience of shooting it itself was as all movies are, was very intense anyway, and it's a blur and rush of events, and it'd be very hard to there was no traumatic event or anything I could pinpoint. Right. One interesting thing which I think helped regarding Christopher Walken is that he was quite skeptical. And so he's a brilliant actor, so he brought a lot to it. But he and I went to Whitley's then studio home in Soho in New York before we started shooting. And Walken and I met with quite a few friends of Whitley, some of whom had been abducted, and that I kind of recreated that scene in the film where there's that group therapy session.
Right.
Whitley was getting upset. I don't blame him. It's how can you see yourself being portrayed on screen, let alone by Christopher Walken? And and he was getting concerned about Christopher Walken's portrayal of him. And I explained to Whitley, which he, perfectly accepted 100%, and that you got Christopher Walken's an artist in his own right, and this is not a documentary on New Whitley. This is a recreation. So you've got to let Christopher Walken do his bit. Otherwise, there's no point in having him. But an interesting thing about that, and if I could just talk about making a movie for a second,
sure.
A very difficult thing is portraying a writer on film, because writers don't do anything. They think.
Don't I know it?
And so writers are not running around firing guns or doing karate. And it just struck me about Christopher Walken that his face is, and I don't want to sound wax too poetic here, but his face is like an action movie. There's so much going on in his face. I thought, well, this is the way of doing it, that we don't know what he's thinking, but there's obviously a lot going on. So that was really helpful for me. The personal thing that happened while we were making the film was that this is not cosmically related, but it's related to the making of the film. That Lindsay Krause was, unbeknownst to us, just about to go through a divorce with David Mamet, her husband, who was on set off and on. And so And so, sadly, they did divorce. I say sadly because it was a bit traumatic while this was going on during the film. But it helped the film, if I can be it sounds like I'm being really cold about this, but I'm not. But it helped the film because the way she portrayed her skepticism of Whitley in the film was she kept accusing him. She's saying, have you got a mistress, or what's this all about? So that gave those scenes a lot of intensity. Because, of course, if you were having an extramarital affair and you came home and told your wife, I've been abducted by aliens, well, that's one scenario. The actual abduction scenes were, and the alien scenes were just kind of disturbing too, because you're going into a surrealistic area, and because I didn't know exactly what had happened, and because Whitley didn't know exactly what had happened, we did experiment a little bit with that, and so that's why some of those scenes do become kind of surreal. The scene with the Christopher Walken seeing himself as a magician doing magic tricks,
which I think that scene completely justified the puppetry of the film, because I remember a lot of people's complaints later, and probably not so much then, but later with the advent of better CGI and that sort of thing, is, oh well, the aliens look fake. Well, in a way they're supposed to. I mean, you've got scenes of him sitting around where he's playing with the masks, and you've got that scene where he takes off a piece of it and sees the beastly
I don't think
alien underneath.
I know. Look, thanks for mentioning that, because I don't think I could have been any clearer that these were masks and this was a fantasy. And for some people, obviously, didn't see those scenes because they said, "Oh, the effects they looked like masks." But again, this is an interesting thing, because Whitley clearly described in the book what I called the Alka-Seltzer man. He clearly described where he wakes up in bed and this very primitive Alka-Seltzer puppet-like thing, a square body and a funny hat, comes racing straight at him through the door.
There it is.
And
there
so, I did exactly that. And then you have people, I guess, and they said, "Oh, it looked like a puppet." Well, yeah, exactly. That's what he described. But that was terrifying to me, actually. I mean, I think that's scarier, because to me, that smacked of more reality in a way than, say, the monster in Alien. Because if you're going to have, if this is really going on, it is not going to be a cliche monster experience at all. It's going to be a much more mentally warping or surreal experience. And if I can just say this about that as well, the dreams, at least in my experience, when you're dreaming, things are often simplified like that. People do look like ghosts, or I don't really know what I'm trying to say here precisely, but the dreamlike quality of that Alka-Seltzer man struck home to me, and to me it was terrifying.
Well, what did you think it was doing in the context of the film? Because he doesn't just run across the bed; they seem to put something in him or take something out of him, right? I
think I'm just theorizing here. Okay, this is complete speculation, fantasy, if you like. If these aliens are around, and we're calling them aliens, if these non-human entities are around, and they're approaching people, and it's impossible for them to approach people as they are, maybe they're not even physical as we know them, then yeah, they would be sending in weird-looking robots and puppets and weird, strange people to make contact. And I mean, we just sent these rovers to Mars, and so how puppet-like is that rover running around on Mars? And if you think of us, that analogy, we are the aliens sending the Alka-Seltzer man to Mars. We've done it. So it's not far-fetched at all to think that we're getting strange things here.
Let me tell you how much the artist's vision differs in my perspective to when I watched that film. I'll tell you what I got out of that guy. which was looking at that was the point, I think, when that little box man came dribbling in, and he had the spiral on his chest, and then they go into the ship and they're opening them up and they're taking things out. I always thought that represented more or less Whitley's mind, that was like a metaphoric symbol or a dreamlike symbol for his mind, because not long after you see him being opened up and diddled with, that's when Whitley says, "You've broken my mind."
Well, I think that's a great interpretation of it. I think that's a great interpretation of it. I mean, that's, when you make these films or when you write these books, and Whitley wrote the book, the unconscious outlines things sometimes very clearly. You don't see it at the start, but that's a very interesting thing. Because Whitley, Chris Walken says, "You've broken my mind."
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and here's the question I got about that, which is a purely selfish one, and that is that I own one of the green bug heads from the bus scene,
right?
That you guys used, which I got from Forrest Ackerman.
Right. Great.
And I actually have now, and I believe it might be the alien face from the very last scene. And maybe you can tell me if I'm right or wrong. This thing is like a Nerf material with a hole in the back. And it looks very much like the face in the final scene where he says, "What do I call a book about you?"
Is it hard?
No,
it's solid.
Yes, it's solid. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's it.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I own both of those. Now,
fantastic.
The question is, how do I get the box man?
I think the box man, I don't know where he is. But,
he got trashed.
Yeah, it's a shame. But no, the box man was great. Funnily enough, in movies you have product placement, and I don't think we ever used any, but we actually did get product placement from Alka-Seltzer.
Wow.
Huh.
That's wild.
Are you and Whitley still friendly?
Yeah, we are. Well, I don't see him. He's in San Antonio, but we've been out of touch for a while. It's been a while since we made the film.
Because, I've heard his, on his radio show, it seems like a lot of times he talks about the movie and there's something about it he doesn't like, but he doesn't really say what it is. Has he talked to you about that, or was it purely the Christopher Walken portrayal?
Look, I don't know for sure, but I believe that's what it was. But certainly no hard feelings whatsoever. No, absolutely not.
That's good.
Yeah, no, I think it's always difficult, though. See, I went really out of my way to respect Whitley's input on the film in every way because he was. I respected the fact that he was saying it was a true story, and I just didn't want him to be saying, "Well, no, that part of it's not true." So
when he described the aliens to you, or the visitors or whatever word you want to use, did they sound like what you then saw on the cover of Communion, or was there a difference?
They're quite different to me, actually, in the sense that what he was describing was not that specific. Mm-hmm. But then he described it to the artist who did that cover. Mm-hmm. And it came out that way. But to me, it was always more non-specific. I mean, this is where you merge into anthropology versus science versus Jungian archetypes, all this stuff, this huge minestrone of things. But the images that. And because I wanted to remain true to what Whitley had said, because he was saying it was a true story, and he described those little blue guys to the artist, and they came out like those little, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, little blue guys. To me, that was just too anthropomorphic. I mean, that was just, that's where you get into. That's where I believe if these non-human entities exist, maybe they did see Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and sent in these little robots. I mean, I don't know. I'm just putting it out there. to me, that was very surreal, and I think that audiences weren't used to a movie like Communion anyway, because it's open-ended, and it's one of the reasons I made the film independently, because I was being pushed by companies who would have made it here, studios, but they wanted a straight horror film. They wanted me to say, yes, these aliens exist, and they're abducting people and raping them. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to make that movie because that was not the story to me, and that wasn't what was intellectually interesting about it. Mm-hmm. But so I think the film caused a bit of confusion in some people's minds. That's fine with me.
And then on the DVD commentary track, you do that with Bill Burns. How did Burns get involved in this?
After I made the film, I read The Day After Roswell, mm-hmm. Bill's book. And I was absolutely fascinated, and I still am. And so I called Bill, and we immediately became good friends. And we still may make, speaking of future projects, we still may together make some movie incarnation of that book, which is a fantastic story. And then we just became friends. And then when I was asked to do a DVD commentary, I was becoming a bit bored with all these directors pontificating by themselves on their movies. So I thought, why not get some other person here so I can have a discussion? And Bill knows a lot about it, so it just made it easier for me. And I thought it was quite interesting.
Any chance of you and Strieber having a discussion on the next edition?
Good idea. Well, I'll certainly suggest it to Whitley.
Well, here's another selfish question, or maybe not. People probably are interested in this. I think going along with the film being some of the most, and Jeremy and I both totally agree on this, some of the most hauntingly gorgeous and ultimately terrifying stuff ever put on film from Communion. You've got Eric Clapton doing the soundtrack, which is probably, for my money, some of the best guitar work he's ever done. So how did he get involved in that? Because I was really surprised when that movie came out and he had done the soundtrack. I was like, wow, this is fantastic. How did he come about for that?
Well, Eric is a very old friend of mine, going back to the 1968 in London, where we were roommates in a building called the Pheasantry, a great place in London in the so-called swinging 60s. And Eric was doing Cream, and I was making what were then called underground movies, but I was a painter. I was earning a living as a painter, an artist. And when Eric, we just stayed in touch all this. And Eric was a movie buff. Eric gave me the money to make my first film, a musical, which I've got to put out on DVD someday when I prepare to face the music, called Trouble in Melopolis. And so, he's just a great old mate. And I just thought when we made the film that it'd be really interesting to get his take. I didn't even know whether he'd be interested in this. This is pretty far away from the work he's doing, the subject matter of this. Mm-hmm. And, we all know, his great work. But he really enjoyed the film. And he said, "Look, I'm not really experienced at doing film scores or anything, but I'll look at the film and I'll just play some themes that come into my head." I said, "Fantastic, to do exactly that." And when I heard it, I was absolutely startled, because it's not what you'd expect at all. It's very, I'd almost want to say, spiritual, soulful, mm-hmm. dreamlike. So he kind of got inside the subject a bit, I think.
And when you would go to cocktail parties and the such after this came out, was the conversation mostly, "Oh, do you believe this crap?" Or was it mostly, "I've got a secret to tell you. This is happening to me too. Don't tell anybody"?
Yeah.
It was both. It was both. I mean, I got inundated by people who said they'd been abducted by aliens. Some were obviously disturbed, and they hadn't happened. But in my opinion, but others were very credible. And I can tell this story. I went to Washington. There was a UFO conference. Actually, it wasn't a UFO conference. It was an abductee conference in Washington in the maybe 89, 90, big conference. I think there were like 2,000 people there. And this guy came up to me and he said, you know what, you're a fraud and Whitley Strieber's a fraud. I've seen the film. You're just charlatans. You shouldn't be perpetrating this on the American people and the people of the world. And I said, well, wait a minute. You don't know me. You don't know Whitley. Who told you this is a fraud? And he said, well, the aliens told me.
Can't argue with that.
Yeah.
No, I couldn't argue that. So, look, whatever variation you can imagine, we got every kind of criticism, but the film's grown in reputation, and I think it is because it's grown in reputation, I think, because it is ambiguous about it. And it was treating this as a serious subject, which I don't think had been done before. Well, 2001 had done it, but not as a true story.
Well, I imagine it's got to be difficult remaining agnostic and being Whitley's friend, because it's not like this just sort of happened this one time. I mean, he's gone on to make all kinds of claims throughout his life about his life. And so I guess if you believe he believes it, do you see anything in psychology that parallels this? I mean, how can he remain... I'm assuming if he's friends with you, you think he's sane. So, I mean, how do you cope with that and still be able to remain agnostic about this?
I'll tell you after my next meeting with Whitley. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not, I just don't know. I mean, Whitley started out being much more agnostic himself, as you probably know. If you read the history, if you read the books, it's a development, Mm-hmm. But the original book, Communion, quite clearly is a book questioning, not asserting.
Right. What do you make of what he's done with it since, with the website and all of that?
Look, I haven't followed it tremendously. I mean, I'm looking for... I haven't read The Greys, but I'm looking forward to reading it. It sounds like a novelization of Communion.
No, not really.
Not really. Oh, good.
It's far more. You know what it really looks like to me is that he wrote an action screenplay and decided to disguise it as a book because it really reads like
fair enough. Yeah,
like
a Michael Bay.
Yeah, I look forward to reading it. I mean, I'm very interested in the other areas that are related to this now, like remote viewing and all this stuff. Mm-hmm. I don't know how much you know about that. You probably know a lot, but that's kind of interesting because it's the military and the CIA were definitely involved in remote viewing programs, mm-hmm. which are, well, you know about it.
Well, yeah. Well, so does this mean that you're going to make? So you're sticking with these topics then? You're tried and true to this.
Well, no,
do you see yourself that way or not?
Look, I'm fascinated with these, with all this kind of fringe areas of human knowledge, and who mm-hmm. wouldn't be?
What do you make of? I'm thinking back to this NSA guy coming to you on a plane and saying, "Yep, that's the most realistic portrayal of abductions ever." I mean, do you think you think that's a lie? Do you think he was in his head joking? I mean, what do you make of a government agent coming to you at all about this?
I think he was. I think he was trying to find out whether I and Whitley were hoaxes.
Huh.
That's the impression I got. That he was trying to find out whether it was a hoax or not. I mean, remember at the time the book was like #1 New York Times bestseller. Mm-hmm. And the book hit a nerve. I'm not sure which nerve it hit, but it certainly hit one. Yeah. And then there's been a lot since then.
Mm-hmm. And do we get to make fun of you about the meat sculpture? Does that come now?
Be my guest. Actually, we were talking about the 60s, and I got disillusioned with the commerciality of the art world at the time. So I thought and I was quite successful as an artist. I was doing illustrations for the Beatles. In fact, the book, The Beatles Illustrated Lyrics, has a lot of my paintings in it. And I started drifting into film, and I thought as a Dada artwork, I would make a sculpture out of pieces of meat. The idea being that you couldn't sell it because it would decay. And so I did that, and actually I just had a retrospective in London, and Eric Clapton opened the show in October, opened the exhibition. But there's a funny thing about the meat sculpture, not speaking of aliens, the gallery in London, it was in Covent Garden, directly opposite Princess Margaret. Went to a restaurant there every Tuesday, and she complained about the odor emanating from the art gallery after 2 weeks. And Scotland Yard arrived. I was at the gallery, and they saw this life-size rotting meat in a glass box, and they said to the art dealer, "Look, there's been a royal complaint, sir. What is this?" And the art dealer said, "Well, it's a work of art." And the police officer said, "We don't care what it is, sir. It's a health hazard, and you must get it out of the gallery." So then it just got a little bit better. So the God bless him, Ziggy Kraus, this art dealer, he took the meat sculpture home and put it in his back garden. And the neighbors, who didn't like him for some reason, the neighbors thought he'd murdered his wife. They called Scotland Yard again, and the homicide squad showed up. And they said, guns drawn, and then they saw that it was the meat sculpture. They said, "Mr. Kraus, this time, please, really get rid of this thing."
See, now that's art.
That's art. That's my. And now, of course, the funny thing is, now, there are these artists who are, Damien Hirst is selling sharks in formaldehyde for £4 million and things. I mean, it's unbelievable, really.
Yeah, I was just having a conversation with a friend of mine, Rosebud, who, used to hang with Andy Warhol and Ginsberg and that whole crowd. And, I asked her, I said, it must be odd to you now because we both live in New York. And, back then it was, there was not only a scene, everything, the way she describes it, everything just sounded alive, Even the pavement of New York sounded alive with this artistic community, and what is it like now, seeing that it's all sort of gentrified and gapified, if you will. And she said, she said of the art world now, she said if you notice, if you look at any art magazine, it's always, first of all, the artist is always sort of slim and sexy, and they're always in the foreground, and in the background, very tiny, is their artwork. And that, she said, that's the biggest difference between now and then.
No, I agree. There was definitely an energy. I think these things come in cycles, and we've definitely been going through a bad cultural cycle for a lot of reasons. But I think that creative energy will come back, and the art world definitely has gone celebrity-oriented, and the prices are absurd. You could a shark in formaldehyde costs more than a Van Gogh. The whole thing's gone mad.
It's idiocracy.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
So what are you working on now? What projects do you have on your plate?
I'm working on a remote viewing movie.
Oh, you are? Oh, good.
Called, we're developing it now. I'm going to shoot it later in the year. It's called Un-American Activities. And,
is it based on any particular books or just all of them?
No, it's an original screenplay. I'm working on a graphic adaptation of various declassified files that I've been studying over the last couple of years. I was working as a part-time. I've always been writing, but the Sydney Morning Herald in Australia was publishing some of my articles, and I started finding these amazing FBI and CIA files on various subjects, by the way, including Marilyn Monroe and stealth bomb. You name it, there's a file on it. But all this stuff is available now because of the Freedom of Information Act. So I'm doing a graphic adaptation based on the most interesting files on a variety of subjects. I'm planning a film on the life of Salvador Dali, a surrealist close to my heart. And I've just finished a mockumentary. I've just finished a mockumentary on the obscure but fascinating subject of Gertrude Stein, the American writer who lived in Paris and discovered Picasso. So aside from that, I'm also...
Where does the mocking come in?
The mocking comes in that we reveal that she did not die in 1947.
Okay.
And she lived on to change world events, including a deep association with Richard Nixon.
I'll be looking forward to all of those.
Yes.
Okay. So it's busy here, and I just came back from China. I was in China in October and Tibet, and I filmed there. I actually filmed some of the Gertrude Stein movies scenes in Tibet, so that's fascinating. And speaking of aliens, the Yeti is a fantastic subject which I'm working on. The Yeti of the Himalayas and Tibet, and
have you? I assume you've been speaking to people up there about that.
I was, yeah.
So do they see it as a... See, we've been talking about, Bigfoot, and I guess I'll just throw all of those in together. Are these creatures that you can find in the forest, or is there some mystical quality? There's UFO lore associated with them as well. Did you find that people out there just thought that they were a creature in the forest, or did they attribute magical properties to it?
Look, there's variations on that. I spoke to some monks in a 500-year-old monastery, the second largest monastery, Kambam Monastery, near a big city in Tibet called Xining, Xining. And he just believed it was a real thing. And he said he'd seen Yeti scalps. He didn't call it a scalp, but that's what he was describing to me, the head, the hair. He'd seen those in other monasteries. But you look, Sir Edmund Hillary, who climbed the top of Everest, if you get into this Yeti subject, he believed the Yeti existed for quite a while. And after he got to the top of Everest, he went back into Nepal with a 300-man expedition to try and find the Yeti, because he'd seen footprints and he'd found hairs. And he went back up there and didn't find one, but found more footprints, and then he concluded that it was a myth. That was his conclusion. But for a while there, he really believed in its existence, because even recently they found footprints at 19,000 feet. And as someone pointed out, that's a long way to go up for a hoax.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't understand how did he conclude it was a myth if he's seen the footprint in the hair? That was hoax?
Well, that's what he said. Now, whether he believed it was a myth or not, I don't know. But, that's what he said.
That's like having an alien abduction experience at Strieber's cabin and thinking it was a dream. Kind of silly, right?
Well,
oh, wait.
That's the words in my mouth. No, it's very interesting. The Hillary Yeti story is a very interesting one. It's part of the movie we're making, by the way. We're getting into that because he shot film as well.
Huh. Well, that's fascinating too.
But see, the Sasquatch, Bigfoot, I think it's more likely that a Yeti exists because of the environment up there. North America's pretty well developed now. The U.S. is anyway. I personally think it's unlikely that there'd be Bigfoot living out there, because you couldn't just have Bigfoot. You have to have Bigfoot and his whole family, wouldn't you?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's true. So I get the sense that you're sort of an adventure man. You actually like to do all of the travel and the work behind your films. Is that true? Are films sort of a way for you to be able to do exploring? Well,
look, it's one of the perks of filmmaking, really, is that you do go to these fantastic places. Yes, I love doing that. As I say, it's one of the perks of filmmaking. You do get to very unusual places and meet fantastic people, by the way, researching these stories. But yeah, my interests they're wide, honestly, guys. They're very wide. I'm very interested in history. I made some documentaries early on. Brother, Can You Spare a Dime, which was about the Great Depression of the 30s, which was a compilation documentary. And I made a movie called Swastika, which was about the rise of Hitler. And that was a fascinating project because I ended up with Lutz Becker, my researcher, finding Eva Braun's home movies in the Pentagon in 1973.
Wow.
And that stuff is widely, it's on History Channel all the time. All that color footage of Hitler and Eva Braun, most of that is what Lutz and I found in 1973.
How do you find that?
Well, the brief story is we were making the film in London, and I saw a photo of Eva Braun with a 16mm camera, and I just turned to Lutz and I said, I wonder where the film is in that camera. And it turned out that she was photographed at Obersalzberg, Hitler's house. So then Lutz and I found out pretty quickly it was the U.S. Marine and Signal Corps, which was an intelligence arm of the Marine Corps, U.S. Signals and Marine Corps, were the first into Hitler's house. And they basically hoovered it and sent everything back for examination to the Pentagon. And after all, this was the man they just defeated who'd nearly, taken over the world. And they wanted the psychological profile of him in detail. So everything was sucked out of Obersalzberg, shipped back. This was April 45. And then, we called the Pentagon. I called the Pentagon, and there was a very nice colonel there, very cooperative, and he said, everything captured by the Pentagon is, at that time, is indexed under date of capture, not content of capture, because there's so much was captured that hasn't even been gone through in detail yet. So he said, if you can give me some dates, I can get back to you. So then we quickly found out they'd gone in, I don't know, it was a 2-week period in April and May, going into May 1945. And so we gave him the dates, and I forgot about it. And then he called in London 3 months later in the editing room. He said, Mr. Mora, it's Colonel, I've forgotten his last name, unfortunately. He said, look, I've located 8 cans of 16mm color film captured in Eva Braun's bedroom. Is that what you're looking for? Well, we fell over. Wow. We fell over.
Well, in doing your research on Hitler and the Nazis, there's all the occult stuff. There's, of course, the extermination of Jews. There's the global domination. Do you have a sense, having looked at, I'm assuming you've looked at all of this stuff, all of these aspects, what their actual motive was? Or can it even be boiled down to one thing?
I think, Hitler said what his motive was. I mean, Hitler clearly said that he was a pagan. He clearly said all this. He wanted to destroy Judeo-Christianity. He thought the Western civilization had gone seriously south with Judeo-Christianity, and he wanted to revert to the old forms of paganism. And Churchill famously held up Mein Kampf in Parliament in 1937, I think, maybe earlier, and said, has anyone read this? Because I have, and I'm telling you, the pagans are coming. And I think, Hitler believed in all of the mumbo-jumbo that he was spouting. He believed in the superiority of the Aryan race. He wanted to subjugate the rest of the world. He wanted to have a master race and have everyone else as slaves. And by the way, they did it in the Third Reich. I mean, they had slave labor right up until the end. So it's a really horrifying and terrifying history. But the simplest explanation is he was, a pagan, and he believed in what they were doing.
Jeff, do you have anything?
Well, one, but it's completely aside from everything that we've been currently talking about. And everybody who's listening can prepare to take a drink. Philip, how much have you read of any of the work of Terence McKenna, if any?
I haven't. Just remind me, what's he written?
He wrote a book called True Hallucinations, and he wrote another book with his brother Dennis, who's been on the show, called Food of the Gods and the Invisible Landscape. And they were essentially two guys who went down with a group of people, kind of a little expedition to the Amazon, and they were looking for not only psilocybin mushroom experimentation, but also ayahuasca experimentation. And the people that they met there had described, encounters with beings while under the influence of these very powerful tryptamine drugs. And here lately, Jeremy and I have started seeing a lot of correlation between the alien abduction scenario and some connective threads with the psychedelic experiences.
Right.
Now, being a guy who hung out with Eric Clapton and Cream way back when, I'm curious if you ever had any sort of experience like that you felt might have helped you either consciously or subconsciously with the Communion Project in how the surrealistic aspects of these things. I have a very...
Well, that's an interesting, it's a very interesting question because, either culturally or scientifically or pop culture, well, it's a very interesting question because at that time we were Martin Sharp, the artist. Martin Sharp was an artist living with Eric and myself too, and Martin did all the Cream covers. That fantastic artwork, actually. He was a leading psychedelic artist, and we were very interested in UFOs long before Communion. I mean, in fact, there's a terrific English magazine called the Flying Saucer Review. I don't know whether you're familiar with it.
Sure.
But we religiously read Flying Saucer Review, as well as Playboy, by the way. And we were involved in a what was then called a countercultural magazine called Oz Magazine. Mm-hmm. And Martin and I did an all-graphic issue of Oz Magazine in, I think it was 1970 or something like that. It's available on eBay, I'm sure. It's regarded as a bit of a classic. But anyway, it's full of flying saucers and stuff. Dredging back in my mind specifically as to whether I ever had an experience like that, that I don't remember, but I just remember long and detailed discussions about flying saucers, aliens, and so on. Now, by the way, 2001, which came out in 1968, had a huge mind-opening effect on this whole subject, because there had never been a mainstream film, let alone one in 70mm Cinerama, dealing in these really esoteric subjects. The end of 2001, which you can probably gather, affected how I shot the end of Communion. The end of 2001, it was incredibly abstract. And it's amazing that Kubrick was able to get that. I mean, his prestige was huge enough that even then, that he could get a Hollywood movie released like that with so many unanswered questions at the end. Mm. And I think it stimulated everyone, that movie. Yeah. But, look, psychedelics have been around forever. I mean, they're even claiming, there's cannabis resin residue in Shakespeare's pipes. I mean, but it goes back to, as we know, Mayan culture, the Egyptians. I mean, there's no question that psychedelics have had a huge effect on human thought, and maybe built into our DNA. Who knows? I mean, the Neanderthals wandering around eating mushrooms survived. Here we are.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, thank you very much for spending an hour with us and letting us pick your brain. And I'm like a giddy little kid. I get to ask all my Communion questions.
Well, thank you. No, it's been a lot of fun. I can't believe it's an hour, but these are fascinating subjects, all of them.
Is there anything that we didn't get to that you wanted to cover, or any question that you wanted to be asked that we missed?
Not really. I've just enjoyed the conversation. It's got me thinking about all these things all over again. There's so many unanswered questions. By the way, I thought Altered States was a pretty good movie and underrated.
Yeah, that just came up in conversation the other night, and that's one that I hadn't seen, and I got chastised like it was, you haven't seen Altered States? Like, I think I was almost kicked off the dinner table.
That's funny.
Now I've got to see that.
Not a bad film. Again, not really understood at the time, but very good film.
I'll definitely be checking that out. Well, Philippe, thank you very much for doing this again.
Thanks, gents. Anytime.
Thank you.
This is Ted Rowe from NARCAP. You're listening to Jeff and Jeremy on Paratopia, and I'm not.
research and investigation into the enigmatic. Eerie Radio is a weekly podcast that features interviews with the world's leading paranormal researchers. Download episodes of Eerie Radio from your favorite podcatcher or directly from the show website at www.eerieradio.com. Eerie Radio. Listen, learn, laugh.
Philippe Mora, Jeffrey. Philippe Mora. Are your nipples hard like a schoolgirl in the way that mine are?
like little diamonds.
That was fun.
Yeah, that was
and that
cool.
actually got
That
deeper
was really
than I
cool.
expected, frankly.
Well, yeah. I mean, and I know that of course, most of the people we've gotten in here have been to talk about these deep subjects and not necessarily Eric Clapton and Cream and.
Well, maybe we should have.
But that was cool, I mean, and I mean, I'll tell you what. Clearly, something happened with him up at the cabin at Whitley's.
No, it was a dream.
I mean, come on, come on. Jeez,
it was a coincidence.
That's a pretty deep and interesting, experience there. I mean, especially I find the old gray or the old alien look kind of puzzling.
Mm-hmm.
With that, and the fact that it smiled at him, that had to have been grisly. But yeah, I mean, really, and a great guy too, super nice, and affording to us. So, yeah, I mean, it definitely not one of our typical guests, but definitely a deep one, and one I think we should get back on to talk about the remote viewing stuff that he's doing. And
oh yeah,
that I mean, that sounds really fascinating.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. I wish I had something to add about this, but I really don't. I just had fun,
Yeah, well,
I mean, it's so weird to have these questions about a movie that you've had forever, and then, 10 years later or whatever it is, 20 years later, just talk to the director, ask him what he meant.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I thought the Alka-Seltzer Man, that's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's the Alka-Seltzer Man. Yeah, I never would have gone there. the little hurdy-gurdy robot. It's the Alka-Seltzer Man. What the hell is that all about? I mean, that's just really, really wild. And quite disappointing, in fact, that I can't own it.
Well, you can recreate it.
I'll make one, yeah.
Actually, the hat of that thing, was it similar? No, I guess it wasn't. Similar to what you experienced when you were 9. When that thing came in and clapped in your face.
No, it was sort of, that was a wok lid type looking thing.
Right.
The little robot had more or less what would have been to its caricature like a little Zorro hat. Which, oddly enough, has been reported in alien stuff before. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of always how I interpreted it, is that was his mind racing, that sort of thing. But I mean, how great is that though, to work with Christopher Walken's like my favorite actor ever, and
yeah,
I'm surprised we didn't get into how we impersonate the show, the movie consistently throughout the show.
Well,
that's someone there.
He's in for a big surprise, a very big surprise.
Very big, yes. So yeah, I mean, it was great, and clearly the guy is interested in the esoteric subjects and making movies about them, which is great because that just brings, much like what we're trying to do, which is to bring people who wouldn't normally be interested in these subjects into being interested. I think the fact that he makes movies about these subjects and tries to engage the public at large with them is pretty...
And that he keeps it real.
And that's a bold thing to try to do,
yeah.
Really. I mean...
Screw you, studios. I don't want to make a horror movie.
Right. I mean, how many people make Communion and make it the heady movie that it is that's still, in my opinion, grossly unappreciated?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I count that as one of the number one for me in respects to Christopher Walken's performance in that was just, to me, was ridiculously quintessential Walken.
Well, and part of it, as he said in the one of the featurettes or on the commentary track there, or not the commentary track on this, on the DVD special edition, was he directed Walken to play however he actually felt about what he was seeing in the scene. So if he saw a little, robot guy coming at him, and he secretly wanted to laugh at it, but the direction on the script is, that he's scared, well, screw that. Laugh, Right. And so there's a lot of that in the movie where and it adds to the surreal quality of everything. And,
Absolutely.
And to me, to the realistic quality of it. Because, it's not like he's laughing at it in the way that an actor breaks character and starts laughing. He's laughing at it like, you gotta be fucking kidding me,
He's mad, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I find it, I was going to say this to him when I was asking about the whole aspect of the DMT experience or the psychedelic experience and making the movie. It's like you watch this movie and you think, how did the guy who made this not have some sort of really bizarre experience like this? There's just, I don't see how anybody could accuratize it. And that's the weird part about it to me, is that you look at that film and you think, man, it's so. I'm not going to say that visually it's 100% accurate or that but the feeling of it is just so dead on to that bizarreness aspect of it that you think, this has got to be more than simple direction here. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, I mean, great film, great guy, great guest.
Great everything. La, 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 la.
Yeah. We're all very happy here today. Rainy Sunday afternoon.
Well, this has been a really eventful 7-minute post-chat discussion that we've had here.
Well, how about we...
it might be a record.
How about we look at the message board? Because we never talk about the message board.
All right. Let me put this on pause and we'll do that. So the Jeff... getting back to our conversation with Debbie Jordan, of course, the one question we both missed was the obvious one. What were those crop formations that you so accurately drew in the 80s that became a reality in the 90s in the English wheat fields? And she sent them to us. What do you make of them? To me, they look too accurate to be coincidence. And so I've either got to rethink these crop circles, or she had mentioned in an email to me that crop circle researcher Colin Andrews says that a lot of people have seen these, have done the same thing. Well, I guess it depends on when she showed them to him, because perhaps he slipped them to the crop circle makers. I wouldn't put it past anybody. Interestingly enough, and we'll, I guess, get into this a little bit later, but I had dinner with some people last night, and Colin Andrews came up through one of the people I was talking to there. Colin Andrews is a friend of his, who he stays away from, actually, because he says Andrews, he really seems to attract, negative spirits and things like that to him. Like, he really revels in all of the occult stuff. Uh-huh. And has written a book with his wife, 2012 for Dummies, which he thinks is just a travesty to have written that, because, well, for one, he didn't actually speak to any of the Mayans. So he's just riffing off the work of, like, Jose Arguelles, or however his name's pronounced, and John Major Jenkins and the various authors whose works are, how you say, questionable. So to me, he doesn't. He'd be interesting. I'd like to meet him and maybe have him on the show, but he sounds like he could be a questionable character, let's say. So I wouldn't put it past him to be tricky like that and to take experiencers' sketches and give them to crop makers to make. But barring that, assuming that didn't happen, and I have no evidence that did, I'm just throwing that out there as another option. What do you make? Does it look like accurate enough to have been a prediction of those circles some 10 years earlier?
Well, I mean, the big question I got with respect to the photographs of the crop circles is, are they, have they been okey-doed by the people who are into that sort of thing? Have they been found to have exploded nodules and higher radiation readings and all of that. I mean, I don't know that. I mean, I'm looking at the ones that you have posted up on the board here. One being, I mean, let's go with the first one, the pyramid with the sun behind it. You know, I think probably in terms of accuracy, that's probably one of the more accurate ones that Deb has sketched on here. But I don't know that that's. I mean, again, I don't know that that's an uncommon looking thing. I mean, that's essentially the same thing as on the back of a dollar bill. So it's not an uncommon thematic with that. As far as the one that's connect the dots, I think that's pretty interesting. Probably alone from the standpoint that I'd like to throw that into a 3D modeling program and turn Deborah's drawing and see if we end up with something that looks like the thing on the right. That would be curious to do, and I actually might do that. And
these can be found at our forum, by the way. We have it right underneath her episode discussion thread is her crop circle thread, so you can go there and look at these for yourself, and then she'll be supplying me with a thread to her own website when she puts them on there, because she has other crop circle pictures that she had previously drawn as well.
Right, and then we have the circles that are kind of put like a, you know, almost like a snake tail, like a rattlesnake tail looking thing. I mean, again, that one I'm not sure. I mean that could be somewhat interesting if it weren't so incredibly simplistic and you know, and able to. I mean that symbol. I mean, how many times has anyone drawn, you know, concentric circles that are just kind of beside each other and going into and now if it had come up as Debbie has drawn it here with the like a S backwards S type symbol, if that had actually shown up in the field, then I'd say, yeah, that's interesting. But
it does have a similar arc to it.
It has a similar quality for sure. And then the last one, which is I call the Ballantine beer logo, or the John Bonham symbol, I think from Led Zeppelin 4. I mean, that again is a symbol that's very old. I can't remember what that's called. The three concentric circles with the or the three circles basically kind of touching it, overlapping, being a different color or a symbol unto itself. That's a relatively common symbol. Now, again, if it had been in the same configuration, I'd say, okay, interesting. But I mean, none of this is meant to detract from what she's doing. And Colin Andrews is absolutely right when he talks about that there was a group, and I think this has actually been on the History Channel or one of those you know, documentaries where they had people you know, in that Avebury, Silver Hill area over in England, sitting on a nearby hill with sketchbooks, and basically they'd all agree on a sketch and they'd sit around and meditate on that, and then not too much longer that thing would appear in the field. And supposedly, from what I remember, those were the exploded nodule, you know, higher radiation levels, you know, perfectly swirled, alternating swirl patterns going down into the crop circle, layer upon layer. I mean, you know, that's some pretty weird stuff. You know, what any of that means, who knows? I kind of always like the open-ended answer that, you know, we don't know what any of these symbols mean consciously, but maybe subconsciously we know something about what they mean. And much, you know, going back all the way to George Hansen's episode where, you know, we were talking about, you know, higher stress levels and change and turmoil will happen, you know, around, you know, paranormal events tend to happen around those kinds of situations, and they have absolutely said time after time about the crop circle phenomena that the most intricate and the most well in the way of numbers of crop formation seem to happen, genuines happen when the world is going through some sort of turmoil or conflict. So you know, all that's really interesting. I don't, you know, I'd very much like to do the connect the dot ones that that Debbie has and try to build that into some kind of maybe cohesive 3D model and see what happens when you actually turn that. Of course, that'll all be respectful in the sense of, what's the relative distance of the dots versus the lines. So I guess in a way that'll be interpretative, but I'd like to see what happens with it.
Well, getting back to the triangle one, it is similar, more similar than I think you're giving it credit for because of the shadow.
Of the shadow.
One side is white, one side is black on hers, and in the other one it's the same sort of thing. It's like the sun is shining, and
when you draw a pyramid,
that's not like the dollar bill, really. That's pretty specific.
No, it's specific in the sense that that's how you draw a pyramid. Anybody who goes to draw a three-dimensional object, and especially if it's a pyramidal, it has to be, one side would have to be darker than the other. I give it credit in the sense that is, pretty interesting. In the fact, I think what's more interesting to me is that the sun that Deb drew behind the peak of the pyramid really corresponds more to me with being the outer edge of the circle on the crop circle. Seeing the sun inside of that. So if you look at it that way, I think it's far and away the most accurate that she did. I don't think that I don't think that there's anything really as far as the shading goes on it. If you're going to draw a three-dimensional object, one side, especially when you talk about this view of a pyramid, one side's got to be darker than the other for it to even look remotely 3D. They're all somewhat impressive in the sense that she drew them so many years beforehand. And of course, if any one of them were exactly 100%, then that's the point where I'd say, okay, let's try to verify the dates on these things. Let's try to really, make something out of this. But people have drawn them before they've shown up. The question is number one, how accurate are they? And number two, are they something so highly specific and individualized that is represented on a drawing versus what shows up in a field? You know what I'm saying? How accurate is it that it has to be that? I don't know. As far as these go, they've all got definite similarities to them. But I'm not saying I'm unimpressed. I am, but it's. I think all of them, save for the connect the dots one, I think all of them use pretty common, geometric patterns and known geometric, assemblages of those type of shapes. So, can you ascribe them to more than doodles? I don't know.
I don't doodle those things.
Oh, I've definitely done the pyramid a few times.
I make hand turkeys.
I don't know. It's interesting. That's about as much as I can say about it.
All right. Well, let me share with you my odd synchronicity
yes.
into dinner last night, and I didn't even tell you part of this, which is, and I don't even know if I should be talking about this really, because I think some of it is sort of, under the lid, but I'm sure I'll hear about it in some way okay. if I'm speaking out of turn. So I guess just take everything I'm about to tell you with a large grain of salt. A few weeks ago, my friend Melissa Reed was telling me about some people she'd met who are representatives of the Kogi indigenous peoples of Colombia. They live 8,000 feet up in the snowy hills of a mountain there, and they don't let anthropologists in, they don't let anyone in. They let the BBC documentary crew in the mid-90s, so there is a documentary about them, but that's it. They're very untrusting of people. To get up there is a bitch, because you have to, they make you take off your shoes to walk, so you're walking up the mountain, and it's a snow peak. So you're walking barefoot in a snow peak mountain up 8,000 feet, where you can barely breathe, if you're not used to that type of height. So and this is where they live, and essentially they're in the way of government building projects at this point, from the government point of view. So they're in trouble. Their land is in trouble, and they consider themselves the heart of the world. They pretty much are a race of meditators, and they claim that they are not human quite in the way that we are. Star people, perhaps, definitely in contact with beings from other dimensions, deities, and that sort of thing, and that if they go, so goes the world. Now, a couple of the tribal elders want to come off the mountain and come to the States and speak, and it wasn't real clear to me what their goal was. Was it fundraising to save their lands? Was it to get their message of this type out to the world? What is it? It's still not that clear to me. And it's also not that clear to the people representing them, because they don't make anything clear. They just sort of say, you'll know when it's time, just read the signs, that sort of thing. And they've actually been picking spots. They've actually been saying, look, this is where we need to go. Now, not having ever visited America, that's pretty odd. So they want to come to New York. And the conversation last night was, and I guess I've got to have this conversation with Phil and Brogno. Do you know of any ancient sites around here, which I don't, that are clean sites, not the Phil and Brogno pre-Celtic, sort of occult, whatever, anomalous sites, but something else. I don't really know what exactly it is that they're looking for, but they definitely know that they want to be in this general area, and when they figure it out, they'll let us know.
Okay.
So, all of that is interesting to me. But, the conversation a couple of weeks ago was, when I thought that this was purely about fundraising, how do we do this? Can Culture of Contact help out in some way? And I had just said, hey, why don't we try to get U2? Like Bono's always up for helping the people, right? And of course, she sort of patted me on the head and said, that's good, Jer. Now let's be realistic. And I'm like, but wait a minute, you're a little Miss Energy. Let's all just, utilize the secret and think on it, and then it'll come to you. Why can't we do this? And patted me on the head. And, oh, yeah, that's nice, Jer. Great. So, Friday night, I go to see my sister's staged reading of a play, and one of the leads in it, I go out to dinner with him afterwards, and she's very nice, and her boyfriend is with her, and he's also very nice, and I get to chatting him up, and it turns out that he is the producer of Spider-Man the Musical. Oh. Now, I don't know if many people knew that Spider-Man the Musical was coming to Broadway, but it is. And the music is being done by U2. It's being done by Bono and Edge. Oh. Not necessarily U2, but the two main guys of U2 are doing the music. And so they got to doing this music through this producer. He had gotten them to do it. So, naturally, I didn't think to ask at the time, but afterwards I was thinking about it on the train ride home. I'm like, wait a minute, this is it. This is my in to Bono.
Right.
I wished for it, and the universe answered. So I feel like I could at least get a message to Bono about this. But then as I had met, this is last night now, Saturday, here at Paratopia. Look, I'm not breaking the fourth wall. I had dinner with Melissa and the two Kogi representatives, one from Colombia who had flown in to talk about the stuff, and the other guy from Connecticut originally. Very interesting people, and but again, it's not really clear that that's even what they want to do, because they need everything to be perfect. Money isn't really the problem. They've had offers thrown their way, and people seem to be going crazy to associate themselves with the Kogi because they are so mysterious, quote-unquote, and reclusive. Mm-hmm. But the Kogi need everything to be just right. They need to do everything on their terms. And so just right to them doesn't mean getting out on a stage. They're certainly not going to speak openly like that. I mean, I almost get the sense of like, if you've ever seen The Dark Crystal, where those elders just sort of move along and do their thing at their pace while the chaos of the world crumbling around them goes on, and it doesn't seem to matter. They're going to get to their destination. It seems like that kind of thing where, where we're the worker ants, and they've already got this figured out, what they're actually going to do. So we'll see how it unfolds. Maybe we'll be involved, Culture of Contact in some way, maybe not. Maybe, ultimately we won't have anything to really valid to offer. But interesting that it's even even on the plate. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Wow.
And that they do want to speak to the world, and that it's not just about getting their land back for them. It's about now's the time for them to come off the mountain and address the world and tell the world something, you know?
Huh.
And the way they're going to tell the world that something is through action, is through not really even publicized action, is through their meditation somehow acquiring the knowledge of a spot on the earth that they need to be to to build up in their, you know, magical way and create an effect from, essentially.
Huh. Now, are these people extremely primitive or not?
I don't know much about that. I mean, I don't even know what primitive means anymore.
Meaning, do they drive cars or?
No. Yeah, they're primitive. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, like I said, you can't even have shoes when you go up the mountain to meet them. They're people who will come out of the forest, see you, and go right back in, and you'll never see them again. You know,
How do they
those kind of
eat?
people. I don't know. I imagine they hunt and gather like any other tribe.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and of course, all the politics of it is interesting to me too, because it's the kind of thing where they have sort of a sovereign nation treaty with Colombia. You know, they've got paperwork that someone has done on their behalf from way back when, but now, of course, it's inconvenient for Colombia because they're in the way of quote-unquote progress. So, and then the other thing that they're known for, I guess, is, you know, they're right on top of coffee. And their coffee is supposed to be magical because, you know, they're somehow blessing it or doing whatever it is that they do. I know I'm not saying that correctly, but whatever it is that they do to it gives it some sort of magical healing properties. So their coffee goes for, you know, thousands of bucks.
Wow.
If you can get it, you know, it's that kind of thing. All very interesting. All very.
So I'm
interesting.
guessing until they come here, we'll have to deal with Maxwell House then.
Yeah, until they get here, it's chock full of nuts for me.
All right.
But I'll keep you updated when I know more, or if I'm told to shut up, I guess I'll do that too, because I guess I sort of need to respect the wishes of these people.
Yeah, it sounds like an interesting project, though.
Yeah. I just wish I knew what exactly it is that we were even talking about. You know, like, what is it that you need? You need money? Do you need...
They didn't answer any of these questions?
Well, they didn't seem to know. They were just sort of like, it's, you know, essentially saying it's not that easy. That, you know, it's hard to talk to people about this because people want cut and dry answers, kind of like what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
People want cut and dry answers, of course, because you want to then act on them and do whatever it is you need to do, but the Kogi don't work that way, you know? It's more a holistic approach to everything.
Wow. That could be incredibly difficult.
Yeah, I imagine it's very frustrating. But they also are very clear about, you know, whatever it is, A, don't feel like you need to do anything, and B, do it at your own pace. You know, there's no huge rush here, even though they're in a rush. You know what I mean? So it's a weird... Everything is paradoxical. It's like, just take your time and do what's right, but this needs to be done now, you know? Of course, their sense of now is completely different than ours, because their sense of time is completely different than ours. I mean, they talk about things, you know, 500 years ago like they're now. And that, I think, that's a common trait even with Native Americans, right? It's that sense of nonlinear time. So,
yeah.
So what they might be saying now, and I'm thinking one thing and they're meaning another. Who knows?
Wow.
Who knows what I even just said?
Not me.
I mean, I just described it, and I don't know what I just said. But that was my wild, wacky weekend. I just thought it was odd that I had that synchronicity with the Bono thing, where it's like, clearly I can get a fax to Bono if I want to about this. So I said to them, you know, if it is about that, then definitely let me know, and I'll slap together a package to give to the guy. In the name of love.
Please don't do that.
One more. No, nothing.
I think what would be really amusing is if you get him involved in it, and they find out that they don't want him involved in it.
Yeah. I want to know how we get him an edge on the show. I just want them to be on Paratopia.
Okay.
for no reason. Just to follow up with Philippe Mora and just, turn this into a complete celeb fest instead of...
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, I don't know. I come away from you telling me all this stuff, and I go, I hope that works out. Because I don't know what it's bizarre to me that they don't really want to tell you what's required or what they need or what has to be
people,
right.
I mean, to give you a little bit of background, one of the people who's working with them is someone who was closely associated with John Mack, and who really introduced him to indigenous peoples from all around, and got him, sort of hooked up into shamanism and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
So wait, what was the question? What were you saying? I just fucking lost my...
I mean, you meet with these people to try to enact something to occur, and they don't know what it is. And it's like, my answer would be, well, what the hell do you want us to do here? I mean, what is it that you need? We'll figure a way to make it happen.
Yeah, one of the things that they, originally when they came here, somehow, some way, they got in contact with, again, primitive people, no phone, no light, no motor car. Came and got a hold of Sequoia Trueblood, who you might remember from John Mack's Passport to the Cosmos book. They knew who he was. Supposedly they're telepathic, and that's how they communicate with each other. That's how they communicate with their representatives, with whom I visited, or who visited me. And so they knew who Sequoia Trueblood was, and that meant something to them, and they said, look, you've got to come meet the elders here on the mountain. And so, I mean, that's how it sort of snowballed into them coming off the mountain, coming to North America. That's essentially who's been trying to meet and greet them with the world. It's the man behind the scenes. And I guess beyond all of this, maybe I shouldn't say anything because I really don't know what it is I'm supposed to not say. But we'll have one of them there, Kogi representatives on the show, and perhaps they can elucidate us a hell of a lot better than my rambling. But just points of interest, I thought. Yeah.
Well, keep us updated with that.
I shall.
Sounds really pretty interesting.
So what else? Anything else we need to address before we go our separate ways?
Well, the stuff with Ted Phillips is still being worked out.
Yes.
For his funding on that. And I actually called him this week, and he must be at Marley because I haven't heard back from him yet. So we'll keep everybody updated with what's going on with that. And a special thank you to Bill and Nancy Burns for contacting Philippe Mora for us and getting us that interview.
Philippe, Jeff. Philippe.
Sorry, Philippe. So yeah, that's. I think that's it.
And special thanks to Philippe Mora for, in the future, getting us tickets to Eric Clapton concerts
and backstage.
Yeah, which he doesn't know about, but
thanks, Philippe.
That email's coming soon.
Rock on.
I'm sure you don't have any enough hangers-on there in Hollywood.
No, of course not. Of course not. Yeah, great show, man.
Party on, Garth.
On to the next.
Ciao.
This is no good. I can't do this. What? No. I want to go home. Please, let me go. Let me smell you. Are you old? Come, let me smell you. Turn off your mic so I can do this.
Sorry.
Let me start this all over again.
I think I could just edit that and use that.
Wait a minute. Let me give you a clean one here.
We are in separate tracks.
Oh, okay. I want to go home. I wanted to go home. Boo. Boo. The first thing I'd like to say is seasoned greetings. And please keep your hands above the table at all times. Boo. Boo.
All right. I think somewhere in there.
I didn't come all this way for you to tell me that that's what it is, because I don't buy that. There's something underneath that. It's like a puzzle. It's like a Chinese box. You're right. It is like a box, and you're not going to be allowed to see. So let's just get that clear. You're not going to let us see you, are you? That's pretty smart. That's... That's right, it is a puzzle. It's like a Chinese box. You're not going to be allowed to see. So let's just get that clear right now. Ridiculous.
All right. I think that's good.
You're home. Yes, I'm home. Something happened. Something happened? That's right. I saw them. They asked me to go with them. Forever, I think. I just came back to get my stuff. Ha 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 ha. Listen to me, Whitley. Look at my finger. I'm going to take you back. Night of December 28th. Why don't you have your usual large portion of... Take us home, Whitley! Was there an owl in here? An owl? I saw an owl. Must have been a dream. Must have been a dream. That was some dream. See, at the diner, we need Don Ecker to play the Russian friend.
God,
they're looking all over for you. You know, I mean.
Hey, they're looking all over for you there. You freaking hump.
Well, right, I know. I went to the psychiatrist, and I was supposed to remember something like prowlers. But I remember something different. I sure do. Little blue fuckers about this big. Let's see who else.
I gotta shut this off.